There's no way this is going to work, right? You can't just highlight everything with one paint, right?
Huh, I wonder who that could be. Oh, hey Dana.
Of course it's gonna work. Pale sand always works.
Well, what about cool colors? I'm a cool colors kind of guy, and this is more of a warm tone. It's not going to work.
It's absolutely gonna work. Don't worry about it.
Alright, well, let's put it to the test, shall we?
Hello everyone, I am Destro, and this is Realm of the Lich King. In this video, I'm painting up a Vindicare Assassin using pale sand as the highlight color for absolutely everything. This is something of an unusual challenge for me. Normally I'd be using individual highlight colors, more suited to, in my opinion, the base color that I'm using on everything. Now, that said, this is kind of a challenge, and I can get behind that, so I've gone ahead and picked out a miniature that, first of all, is one that I've always wanted to have. I do like the Vindicare Assassin. I think it's a really cool part of the 40k lore, and I think it's a really cool miniature besides. These guys are snipers, and they wear black bodysuits. They also don't wear very much in terms of metallics. I've picked this miniature out specifically because I wanted one that wouldn't have too much in terms of metallics on it. It wouldn't have lots of more solid traditional block colors that I can highlight up with the pale sand. Eventually I did figure out how to use pale sand on metallics, but that'll be a bit later on in the video. For now, I'm just painting up the black bodysuit, mostly using a bunch of grays. I'm not going to be talking about individual paints as much for this video, as I've used them all before, and this is all about pale sand. So here we go, we got our tiny little brush, little tiny highlights. I ended up adding a little bit of flow improver to the pale sand, airbrush flow improver. I found that this helps prevent the paint from drying out as quickly while it's on the brush. I think the air here is a little bit lacking in humidity, so paint on the brush that small does tend to dry out pretty quick. So now that I've finished up with the black bodysuit and kind of proved myself that pale sand will at the very least work for highlighting black, I've gone ahead and blocked in the base colors for most of the rest of the model. Browns, reds, the gun I'm doing in blue because I did want to have something cool. Oh, and here we go, here's desert yellow. This paint is horrible. The coverage on desert yellow is awful, I don't know what it is. Nobody has ever been able to make a good yellow in this shade that has any sort of decent coverage whatsoever. Just the way desert yellow is. But it's okay, it'll be stonework, it's fine if it's a little mottled. The assorted leather and pouches and straps and things I'm going to be doing in brown leather. I find brown leather to be a little bit easier to paint than black leather, just the way it is for me. So I'm going to be doing them all in brown. I could be doing these in the same sort of brown as I did for my Primaris Judicer, but I decided not to put quite that level of effort into weathering it. That challenge was about pushing my skills and seeing how well I could do on a miniature, and this challenge is about pale sand all the things. I did, however, end up using the same sort of contrast over base coating technique that I ended up with on the Judicer. I thought that had worked pretty well for the leather there, and so I've used it again here. I've also gone ahead and covered the entirety of the stonework and base and everything in the background while I'm at it. I needed that to be a little bit darker, so went ahead and took care of it. Alright, more pale sand. Pale sand on the leather this time around. I edge highlighted the gloves and then decided that I wasn't super huge fan of the sort of more thick block lines I was getting from that, so I started more tapping randomly along the edges, and that ended up working a little bit better for the leather, I think. Now, color variety was going to be a bit of an important thing for this challenge. I needed to see if pale sand would work across a broad variety of colors. The Vindicare, being mostly clad in a black bodysuit, isn't great for that, but he does have some places where you can add quite a bit of color. So there's green on his grenade, and blue on the gun casing. This actually was the color I was most worried about highlighting with the pale sand. This is a cool color, and as I said in the intro, I wasn't sure how well this was going to work. Pale sand is bright and warm. This is not. Now, while I'm taking care of doing a wash, let's learn about Vindicare Assassins. Assassins of the Vindicare Temple are master snipers and nearly matchless at remaining unseen and unheard, a lethal shadow who strikes from hiding and fades away. These assassins eliminate enemy leaders with one precise surgical strike. Vindicare Temple assassins are often assigned to slay those who use mob rule and rousing oratory, rewarding sedition with the seemingly divine retribution of an invisible, untraceable sniper. Many false clerics have fallen to a Vindicare's bullet as they preached their blasphemous credo. Rebellious politicians, cultist rulers, and revolutionary leaders who speak out against the wisdom of the Imperium constantly fear being cut down upon the rostrum. When such charismatic figures die at the hands of a faceless servant to the Emperor, their followers become disillusioned and fearful. This method ensures that many heresies are silenced with a single shot. A shot from this gun, the Exodus rifle, which I am here finally getting the opportunity to highlight using pale sand. This ended up actually giving the rifle's casing a sort of like plasticky, really reflective Nerf gun kind of appearance. A cool effect if that's the sort of thing you're going for, but maybe a little bit stark for my liking. Still, it did work, and I can't deny that. If you're looking for a high-gloss plastic sort of look, this is a good way to get it. Moving right along, quick overbrush of the stone using some deck tan, which is another excellent color from Vallejo. And there we go, everything overbrushed. Overbrushing is similar to dry brushing, but you leave a little bit more paint on the brush. I wasn't quite satisfied with the way that came out, though. It did leave a little bit of a dusty look, as it does tend to do, and so a little bit of edge highlighting and final highlighting with pale sand, because of course that's what I have to use. Can't use deck tan, gotta use pale sand. And the stone comes out looking pretty nice. Very happy with the way this turned out. With the bodysuit, base, and stonework completed, most of what was left to do was little details. While I work on those, here's another little bit of lore about the Vindicare Assassin. Often, Vindicare Assassins are dispatched when the Imperium cannot or will not send a larger force. The disruptive effect of a sniper upon enemy morale and its chain of command can keep entire armies pinned in place, its leaders frightened that making any move will lead to their doom. The Vindicare Temple trains its assassins to infiltrate quietly onto a planet's surface and locate a prime position to observe the enemy. Vindicare Assassins are renowned for selecting only the most advantageous location to take their shot, sometimes waiting unseen for weeks on end to make the perfect kill. So for most of the reds on this model, I started with the darker red as the base, and then went up to vermilion as kind of my final highlight apart from the pale sand. But with the eye lenses, I felt they could use just a little bit more vibrancy, so with them I went all the way up to orange. But wait. Pale sand. Tiny little dot of that in the corner of each eye lens. Normally I'd use white for this, but using the pale sand lends sort of a more warm reflection. It looks pretty decent, especially for a desert environment like this guy is supposed to be standing in. And then of course deck tan, because deck tan is wonderful for highlighting bone. And a little bit of skeleton horde contrast over all of those skulls and things, just to get some sort of shading down into the recesses. I highlight these up with pale sand afterwards, and that makes them all look pretty good and skeletal. My love of skeletons is well known. Of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't miss a spot. Forgot to highlight the pale sand onto the reds, the little tassel on the knife here, and the little aquila on the casing of the gun. I do go ahead and get these now, but ideally I would have been able to highlight all of this when I was working on the eye lenses. Just forgot. Happens sometimes. Or all the time, if you're me. But with that, that's every regular color on the miniature done, and it's time to move on to the metallics. I ended up going with a sort of dark tin brass kind of color as the base coat for every metallic on this miniature. I used it for the ones that were going to be silver and the ones that were going to be sort of more bronze or copper. It worked out. I think. Sort of lent a darker iron cast to the gunmetal, and of course this is the normal color that I would use for base coating bronze or that sort of thing anyways. Having a dark brown metallic like this underneath tends to lend a bit of extra richness to your colors, especially if, as here, you're not using a wash over top after the fact. I decided not to for these. What I did decide to do is cheat slightly on the metallics. For the highlights on these, I got my bright silver paint and just mixed a little bit of pale sand in. Hey, that counts, it's my challenge. I can set the rules to be whatever I like. And this did work. It probably dulled down the metallic a little bit, but there is pale sand in there and it is highlighting metallics. If I'd wanted to go full NMM on this, I could have just used pale sand for that, but I am nowhere near confident enough in my abilities to try out NMM. What I did do though was use the silver and pale sand mix even for the brass metallics. Normally I'd have used a gold, but here the silver and pale sand worked okay. And that's it, that's the end of the miniature. Painted everything using pale sand as the highlight. I'm surprised by how well this worked, honestly. It looks pretty good. Not sure I'd add it to my regular painting repertoire, but as a one-off challenge it was pretty fun. With that, that's the end of the video. Give it a like if you liked it, and leave a comment about your own adventures with pale sand. I've been Destro, you've been great. See you next time.